So I've pulled 12 questions on the HX One from various sources around the internet, be that in my own comment sections, in polls that I've done, or just, random Reddit threads. I'm going to answer each one of them in this video. So the first question that I've been seeing a ton is, does it have all of the models of the Line 6 Helix? Since the HX One is effects only, you don't have any of the amp, the cabinet, or the impulse response blocks that the larger Helix units have. However, all of the actual effects from the Helix are in the HX One. This includes some of the more DSP intensive blocks like the poly pitch, for instance. It also seems to be on the same update schedule as the rest of the Helix family, which means that whenever the Helix gets new effects, the HX One will likely be updated for these effects too. So the second question is going to be, can it run more than one effect at a time? I know a lot of you are probably thinking that you can run a simple delay block with an overdrive or something like that, since the DSP in the pedal would technically allow for this. However, that's not really the case. This pedal is designed to be one effect at a time, hence the name HX One. I think part of the reason why they only kept it to one effect block at a time is because of the size of the screen itself. Keeping this screen size small meant keeping the power draw low, and therefore we get a pedal that fits on pedal boards better. Question 3. Can it be run in 4 cable method, utilizing both the input stage of the amp as well as the effects loop? It can, but there are quirks. I don't think the effects loop in the HX One was specifically designed for running in 4 cable method, so the menu system seems backwards. You have to set your delays and reverbs to pre, and your drives and things like that to post. In post, your drives will run into the front end of the amp, but in pre they will run in the effects loop. This is because the HX One's menu system focuses around the HX One being the center point of your signal chain rather than the amp. Question 4. How does it work with other pedals? Since the HX One was predominantly designed to be part of a pedal board, it makes sense that it should stack nicely with other pedals. Let's run it with 2 overdrives stacked, and then we'll have some reverb and delay from my board too. Yeah, so that works pretty fantastically, as expected. Question 5. Why are there no user preset slots? This is one that sort of stumped me when I first opened up the unit. Typically in multi-effects pedals you'll see a great big block of blank presets towards the end of the preset list for you to add your own. Now, the point of the HX One is that since it's just a single effect at a time, there is no real need to have these blank presets since you can just overwrite what's already in the unit. HX One doesn't have an empty block. When you've only got a single effect loaded up, the bypass functions exactly the same as an empty block would. Therefore, to achieve an empty block, it's probably best just to bypass the effect and then save your preset with the effect bypassed. Question 6 is a heavy one. Why does it cost so much? I've been seeing so many people saying that the HX One should cost the same as the Line 6 M5. That's sort of £100 to £150 price point. Now, the HX One is a little bit steep at £250, but I do think this is justified. So, the HX One is a 150% price markup over the original Line 6 M5's RRP. This mostly just covers the inflation between the two units. It's been 11 years since the Line 6 M5 came out, and inflation's gone up about 150% in that time, so I think it's balanced itself out quite nicely. There's also the notion that the generational jump between the two units warrants a higher price point. Something like the Pod HD 500 was replaced by the Line 6 Helix at a 300% markup. If you don't look at the rest of the Line 6 lineup, like the Stomp and the Helix effects and things like that, it actually stacks up quite nicely price-wise against its competitors. You've got things like the Strymon, the Eventide, and the Universal Audio, which are more specific single effects versions of the HX One, and these are priced even more expensive than the HX One is. Question 7. Is there a desktop editor, and what does the desktop app do? The sole purpose of the Line 6 Librarian is to manage the presets, not to edit them. So you can change their names, you can reorder them in the list, you can save them, you can back them up, you can export them, and you can import them, but you can't edit what's actually in the preset. I would say this is something of a misfire. I would like to have seen a desktop editor on this one. I know it's just a single effect at a time, but I still like being at the computer for most of my workflow. Question 8 is, how difficult is it to use? I would say that for most people this is going to be super simple to use. You've got the main effects knob which chooses the effect, and then you've got the 3 main parameters for that effect on the top, as well as a simple bypass button. For most people that's going to be everything you need to know. There are a bunch of deeper dive features that you can get into in my full tutorial of the HX One, which I'll link below, but most of this is going to be for more of the power users. The average user is really just going to need that effect knob and the top 3 parameters, and they'll be good to go. Question 9. Who is the HX One for? I think this is mainly going to be for people that want one-off effects on their pedal board that's not something you'd buy a dedicated effect for. For me, that's things like ring modulators, flangers, and pitch shifters. I never use them enough to warrant buying a dedicated effect pedal for that, however they're nice to have just for those one-off occasions. Question 10 is more of a nerdy one. It's, what does the new Flux feature do? The Flux feature lets you select 2 sets of parameters per effect. So for instance, you can set up an overdrive pedal for both a low gain and a high gain overdrive. So say we have the gain down low and the volume up high for the first one, and the gain up high and the volume down low for the second one. The Flux button will now swap between the 2, so you've technically got 2 different gain stages per preset. So now we're going to cycle through this preset that I've made. I've got the clean tone, I've got the pillars on, and then I've got the pillars fluxed to a higher gain. One other little side question associated with the Flux that I was asked is, does it work when you're holding down the button or do you press it to activate? This is an interesting question. With the Flux button, you sort of use it like an expression pedal, only it automates itself after you've pressed the button. So you can set the time it takes for the Flux to engage, as well as the time it takes for the Flux to disengage. This can be particularly useful for things like pitch shifters. Question 11, is there a gap when you switch presets? I'd say there's a sort of very minor gap. It's not noticeable enough to be a problem, but you may hear it if you're listening out for it. If you're particularly sensitive to this, you may need to get creative with your switching and, maybe take advantage of the Flux controls, but I don't think it's going to affect most people. The final question is, what category of pedal would I replace with the HX One if I needed to make space on my pedal board for it? I think the HX One does everything to at least an agreeable standard, so I'd say the best bet would be to swap out whatever you're using least on your board. For me, I was quite happy to swap out one of the uglier sounding HM2 style drive pedals for the HX One, since the purpose of the pedal was to be that ugly, brutal, horrible sound anyway. However, I think I could comfortably swap out pretty much any pedal on my current pedal board with the HX One and still be happy with the results. So that's everything that I've got for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope I answered your questions. If you've still got any questions for me, please leave them in the comment section down below. If you'd like to check out my full review on the HX One, there's a link on screen to do that, and I'll also leave a link in the description box. That's all for this one. I've been Kai.